With just 2 weeks remaining until Election Day, both sides are pulling out all the stops, holding rallies and events in key battleground states. In North Carolina, one side is heavily focused on issues like the economy, immigration, and energy. They are targeting specific demographics, particularly Latino men, in what is expected to be a razor-thin election. During these rallies, the rhetoric has become increasingly harsh, with personal attacks aimed at the opposing candidate, questioning their intelligence and work ethic. On the other hand, the opposing campaign is emphasizing that this election is about much more than just policies. For them, it's about the very survival of democracy itself. Their campaign has focused on defending fundamental rights, particularly reproductive rights, which have become a major issue in states where restrictive abortion laws have been enacted. The upcoming event in one of these states will aim to make reproductive freedom a central talking point in the final days leading up to the election. Meanwhile, with early voting already underway in some places, concerns are growing about what could happen if the results are close. One side has already made claims that the 2020 election was unfair, and they've hinted that they may contest the results again this year. Legal teams are being assembled on both sides to prepare for potential challenges. As the election draws nearer, these legal battles could play a major role, especially in closely contested swing states. Both campaigns are now fully focused on turnout, recognizing that this election could be decided by just a few thousand votes in a handful of battleground states. In these critical areas, voter mobilization efforts are ramping up. Door-to-door canvassing, phone banking, and targeted advertisements are in full swing, as both sides try to convince undecided voters and those who have typically been less engaged in the political process to show up at the polls. At the core of this election is a fundamental debate about what kind of leadership the country needs moving forward. One side argues that their opponents' behavior, particularly their rhetoric and past actions, make them unfit for office. They are painting a picture of a leader who is divisive, reckless, and out of touch with the needs of the American people. This narrative is designed to appeal not only to their base, but also to disillusioned voters who may have supported the opposing candidate in the past, but now feel uncomfortable with their direction. On the other side, the argument is that the current administration is weak and ineffective. Their campaign is focusing heavily on what they see as failures in addressing the economy, national security, and immigration. They argue that a strong, decisive leader is needed to navigate the challenges the country is facing, and they are positioning themselves as the candidate who can deliver on that front. At their rallies, they've continued to hammer home these points, claiming that the opposing candidate is unprepared for the job. As both sides continue their final push, the spotlight is also on undecided voters in swing states, particularly in places like Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin. These voters, many of whom feel torn between the two candidates, will likely be the deciding factor in the election. Polls show that many are weighing issues like the economy, healthcare, and immigration against concerns about character and leadership style. For many voters, the choice will come down to whether they prioritize policy over personality or vice versa. One candidate is seen as strong on economic issues, while the other is perceived as more in touch with the social and democratic values that are at the heart of this election. The stakes are high, and both campaigns know that their ability to persuade this small but crucial group of voters could make or break their chances. As we enter the final days of the campaign, expect the rhetoric to continue intensifying. Both sides are making their closing arguments, emphasizing the stakes and urging their supporters to get out and vote. With such a close race, every vote will count, and both campaigns are working to ensure that none are left on the table. In some areas, there are even concerns about voter suppression efforts, adding to the tension as Election Day approaches. The outcome of this election could very well be one of the most consequential in modern history. Not only will it determine the direction of the country for the next 4 years, but it could also have lasting impacts on the nation's democratic institutions and values. That's why both sides are so focused on making sure their supporters show up at the polls. Early voting numbers are being closely watched, and while turnout has been strong so far, both campaigns are working hard to ensure that they maximize their base's participation. One major question that looms over this election is what will happen if the results are disputed. Given the rhetoric that's already been used by one side, there is a very real possibility that this election could end up being contested. Both campaigns are preparing for this scenario, and legal battles could play a significant role in determining the final outcome. It's possible that the election results won't be finalized on Election Day, and both sides are bracing for a potentially drawn-out fight. But for now, the focus remains on the campaign trail. Both sides are holding rallies, making speeches, and doing everything they can to energize their supporters. In some cases, they're bringing out big-name surrogates to help get out the vote. High-profile endorsements are also being rolled out in an effort to sway the small percentage of voters who remain undecided. As we get closer to Election Day, the pressure is building. Both sides are keenly aware of what's at stake, and they're doing everything they can to make sure their message is heard loud and clear. Whether it's through traditional campaign methods like rallies and speeches or more modern approaches like social media outreach and digital advertising, the goal is the same: win over as many voters as possible and ensure a strong turnout. For voters, this election represents a critical moment in the country's history. The choices they make at the ballot box will have far-reaching consequences, shaping not only the next 4 years, but also the future of American democracy itself. As both campaigns make their final pitches, voters are being asked to decide which vision of the country they believe in. In the end, it will all come down to turnout. With the race as close as it is, every vote will count, and both campaigns know that they can't afford to leave any stone unturned. Whether it's through grassroots organizing, high-profile endorsements, or targeted messaging, the final push is on. The next 2 weeks will be critical, and as Election Day approaches, all eyes will be on the battleground states that could ultimately decide the outcome of this historic election.